Hello and welcome to the 19th Celebration of Pride, the latest installment in our event series designed to honor and uplift the communities we serve. I'm Kate Sosin, one of the LGBTQ plus reporters at the 19th. Today, I'm joined by actor and advocate Brian Michael Smith. He plays Paul Strickland in Fox's 911 Lone Star. He also played Twan Williams in Queen Sugar and Pierce Williams on The L Word, Generation Q. Both on and off screen, Brian has been a fierce advocate for trans representation and trans rights across the country. Brian is also just a really good friend of mine. I typically don't interview friends in my day-to-day reporting. However, since we are talking about trans joy and representation, something important to both of us, I am. Brian, thank you so much for making the time to talk with us today.
Okay, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and to have the honors of being interviewed by one of the finest journalists I know.
And you're so well dressed, I have to say.
I mean,
did you get the idea?
it just came to me. It was the vibes in the air that I just pulled down,
It's a really weird time to be a trans person in the world. So I'm gonna start there, specifically with you. I was just reading GLAAD's accelerating acceptance study, which said that only 30% of people know a trans person, which to me means that if people see a trans person, the chances are that they're going to see a trans person on screen, on TV, in a movie. And a lot of times that person might be you. And I'm very curious, what is it like to be Brian right now in a world where the images that we're seeing of trans people are so mixed right now?
Well, I feel like a lot for me on a personal level hasn't changed because I was very conscious about being visible and use my visibility to reach people who don't know that they know trans people. So it's something that's always kind of been at the forefront of my work, especially once I felt like I had a grasp on the industry and a foothold, within, right? I got my credits, I paid my dues. I felt like I learned the ins and outs. And then as the material started to catch up with my interests and there was just better representation of trans people, period, better characters were being written, trans masculine characters were being written and explored. I was like, this is the time for me to use my voice as an artist and use my art to speak to the things that I feel like I'm not seeing in the world, things that I wish that I could see. So I had the opportunity to do that, early on in 2017, right after this sort of trans tipping point sort of happened, due to the work of, Candace Kane and Laverne Cox and things like that. So I felt like I was standing on the shoulders of people who came before me and sort of opened the doors, but I was able to do that as a Black trans man. And I feel like concentric circles of outreach, right? I started with OWN, and I got to kind of break into a very Black community who, weren't really having these conversations, and got to be this kind of representation there for a different kind of Black masculinity, which I thought was really beautiful. And then, but it was on like a cable channel that, not everybody was subscribed to OWN. A lot of, carriers don't even like carry OWN. So it was kind of a smaller circle. Then, to go into the L Word, this is something that had a strong community around it to begin with, this property, and it had already had some trans masculine representation in the first iteration. Now they're coming back with a new iteration. So I'm reaching people who may not know that they know trans masculine people, or who may have only had their understanding of trans masculine people from what we saw as a misrepresentation of the trans masculine experience from the first go around. And so I reached into a sort of wider, but it was Showtime. You have to subscribe to Showtime to have it. To then go to playing Paul Strickland on this show. It's a network primetime television show on Fox, which is broadcast to millions of homes. It's completely different, than something you have to specifically subscribe for. So I'm reaching people in the middle of the country who may not make the choice to interact with programs that feature characters that are outside of their experience. It was like you tune in for the Rob Lowe and for the firefighters, and it's like, oh, Black trans man here with this. So I felt again, like conscious of it, because it was something that I wanted to do, because I feel like the more people see a fully authentic humanized character on television in their homes, the harder it is for them to hate, because now you have an understanding, now you have a connection to something that's kind of real, as opposed to just these ideas that are being spoon-fed to you by quote unquote news organizations, or by legislators who are saying specific things because they want to distract you from other policies they're trying to sweep under the rug. So it is a weird time now that we're on the other side of the tipping point. I feel like the point tipped and now we're kind of swinging backwards a little bit. But we all know that with consciousness and with effort and with joy and resistance, it swings back further the other way. So I'm riding it out, doing the same thing I was doing when I first kind of jumped on, which is by being authentic, by using my voice, by using my platform and being visible.
And you're also, I have to imagine, like, you being on TV means so much, especially there's so little visibility around trans men, especially for trans kids and Black trans men. What do you hear from people who reach out to you about what they're going through right now? What is that like for you?
It's, on one hand, it's really sad because a lot of people feel isolated, especially men of trans masculine experience, because a lot of the representation that we see in media is focused on trans feminine people or people who are non-binary. But for people who identify as specifically trans masculine, they don't see that much representation, especially for people who are trying to get into traditionally, I guess, masculine like jobs. Like, I've had people say, I want to be a firefighter, but I didn't think that I could because of my trans experience. I didn't see anything like that. Or, I wanted to be a police officer. I wanted to, kind of broach these, traditionally masculine areas. And I didn't feel like I could until I saw your character do it and I saw your character being embraced. And then seeing you as Brian, the actor, being able to be your full self and do, and then like seeing that there's a place for you. So it's sad to hear people to this day, 20 years after I went through a similar experience, still feeling like I'm the only one and I'm isolated and I can't find a community. But then to hear that they are finding some connection because they see me, and that has given them hope. I get a lot of messages like that. Like, I didn't see myself for a long time, but seeing you as a Black trans man lets me know that, I'm not alone, gives me someone to point to when I'm having conversations with my family. I think that's a really big one for me because there's a lot of, again, mischaracterizations of what is possible for trans people. And so but my experience was my parents as growing up in a Black kind of Southern Baptist tradition family was, you're not going to find happiness, right? Like, no one's going to accept this. You're not going to find love. Just this, but it was all based on like fear because they never seen it either. So it must mean that it's true that this isn't possible for you. And so if you go down this road, all these things like, a wedding and, job security, like that doesn't exist for you because they don't see it. So I'm like, well, actually, I'm going to do it. I'm going to try. So to know that people now have me as an example when they're having these hard conversations with their family, like really, really means a lot.
I want to ask you, if you feel comfortable, will you tell us the story of how you met your wife?
Yeah, definitely comfortable. So when I finished college, I was doing a lot of acting adjacent work. So media literacy and teaching drama to kids was kind of my thing. I did it in Michigan, and I worked around Detroit and Romulus area and working with young people. It was a really rewarding experience. I'm like, I know I need to go to New York or LA if I really want to make this my career. So I went to New York first, and I was working in this elementary school. And I was there for a year and I had a pretty decent experience there. And then my second year, there was a new 5th grade teacher. And she was like the only Dominican person that I think I had met at that time, coming from the Midwest. I'm like, are you Puerto Rican? She's like, I'm Dominican. Like, that's the difference. I'm like, I know now. They're two very separate islands, two very separate cultures that I respect very much. But this Dominican woman comes in here, and I mean, she's brilliant. She's gorgeous. And just has this glowing, kind heart that you just can't help to be like drawn into. And so she invited me to her birthday, and I wasn't able to go because the person who actually drove me out from Michigan picked me up in a tractor trailer and like drove me out to New York. It was his birthday, and like, I can't come. And she was like, I was just being nice. So if you're not going to my birthday, then forget it. I was like, no, I'll take a rain check. And so the time came, I think later on in the fall, I was like, hey, I want to take up that rain check. And, she gave me a hard time, but she finally said yes, and we dated, and the rest is history.
And she's just one of the loveliest people ever.
Truly,
Yeah.
absolutely. Is I mean, again, like just radiant, kind heart, um, willing, and like has this sort of openness that I wish more people would have, like as an ally. So even when she like doesn't understand something, she doesn't approach it from a place of judgment. She'll always kind of naturally approach it from like curiosity and care. And I think as a teacher, you definitely need that for sure. But then in our day-to-day life, you when you present something to someone that you're uncomfortable with or that you're vulnerable about, to know that they're going to be curious about it as opposed to judging you about it, or wanting making you want to dim. She never really ever tried to dim anything that I brought to her table. And I'm this crazy actor, there'd be some rational people would probably like, Brian, let's think this through. Just like, okay.
You your life has changed a lot over the past few years, obviously. And I'm curious, like, there's still things about being trans in the world that are like challenging or hard, right? And I'm curious, if they are challenging or hard for you, like the things that we navigate as trans folks, like healthcare, bathrooms, clothing, the normal stuff of being trans. Like, what is that like for you? Is it still tricky? Is it still complicated to be trans in the world, even if you are on TV? And like, should we find comfort in that, I guess?
Yeah, like the biggest change I feel for me hasn't necessarily come because I'm on TV and the access and the privilege that I have now. Like I have a sense of security just in general that I hadn't had throughout my 20s and my 30s. Sure. That is very, very different now. But I would say because I transitioned and like came to my understanding my identity in the early 2000s, there was an ability to access information that the generation before me did not have.
Yeah.
So they had a struggle that was very different. And I guess the space in society that the generation that came before me had was different. So it was like, especially for trans men, I think it was Thomas Page McBee really put into words. He was like, during this time, it was you transition, and the goal was invisibility. You transition and you assimilate into society. So you're going to transition, you're going to be a cis passing straight male for all intents and purposes. And it was a very gate kept, medicalized thing. And you kind of like, there wasn't that so much of a relationship to the identity of trans. It was just something that you kind of went through to become who you are. And again, like it was hard to get that information. It was hard to find it. And like it was kind of I held close because there was a lack of safety. Like I feel like the generation that I came into, there was more access to each community online now, and it was a little bit easier to access the information. So I'm in this whole like online blog sphere, like that even predated the YouTube generation. But a lot of the information in the cis community was shared through like blogs and journals and things like that, which made us feel like, oh, okay, and helped us see like there's a path down the road and this sense of community. And because we had now this cache of like images of the journey and the process, and then the generation that just came after me, the YouTubers that were giving voice to it, that were talking about it, and like you could go to the channel and like this freely available information kind of started to happen at the same time that the representation in the wider media was starting to become more authentic, right? And then society in general was like, wait, the other people have different experiences, and you know what, that's okay. And I think these were like the Obama years, and it was just a different cultural space that had more acceptance in general, that allowed us to do things. And it took a lot of the gatekeeping. Like you still had standards of care for your trans, you still had to do your therapy. Like that didn't go anywhere because that's important. It's important, but the barriers that a lot of the states had to like being able to change your gender marker and being able to change your name, that information became a lot more available. So for me, as someone who transitioned in the early to like mid 2000s, it was easy because I changed my name, I changed my gender marker. Fortunately, I was one state away. If I had been born in Ohio, then I wouldn't be able to change these things. But because I was born in Michigan, I was able to change these things, get everything to line up with my gender identity. And because I'm a binary person, I have another set of privileges, even though I'm of trans experience. I'm binary and I look cis passing. So having my gender identity line up, having my name line up, having my physicality line up with what I'm saying I am, and having pronouns that, are where people are the most comfortable, I haven't had that much resistance for a while because, I'm 20 some odd years in my transition. And I came through this time where there was more visibility for trans people in general, whether they were characters or on television, or literally people sharing their experience because they now had access to do it through YouTube and through, TikTok and stuff now. So it was different in that way. So a lot of the things that were challenging to me before I transitioned, I found less of a problem later on for me because I have the privilege that comes with being cis passing and in a basically heteronormative looking relationship, right? So a lot of the antagonism that my trans feminine siblings are experiencing and that my non-binary siblings are experiencing, I don't necessarily experience in the same way. Inwardly, because again, I've been able to embody myself fully, in addition to like the physical transitions that happen, there's a sense and a process of coming to peace with yourself that I feel like I was able to go through, especially because I moved away from Michigan and I was in New York, and I got a chance to just be Brian without any caveats. I'd like finished my transition in the physical aspect in which that I wanted to do. So I got a chance to just be who I was trying to be all this time without any questioning, without any like reticence. Like if I give my ID to the bartender, what's going to happen? I didn't have to deal with that at that stage in my life. I had to deal with that in my early 20s when I was in Michigan, and it was the discomfort. And again, like my safety would be at stake, like if I go into the wrong bathroom. I remember, very early on before I even started any hormone therapies, like I just kind of like my template is very masculine. So whenever I tried to not be feminine, I would be read that way. And I remember going into a restroom and then the woman coming in being very startled and then going back and like checking the door and then like coming in. And then I just to make her comfortable going, oh, I must have made a mistake. And I left, but to make her comfortable. Right. So I haven't had to deal with that on a personal level in a while. But what's scary about right now is that the way this legislation is happening, it could put me in that position again. It can put me in the position to not have access to the medication I've had access to for the past 20 years that allowed me to be who I am, and just to maintain my health now. Because it's not like if I don't have access to my medication, I'm just going to revert back. It's just no, I'm going to just have health issues with my endocrine system now because I don't have access to this. Or I couldn't imagine walking into a woman's bathroom right now. I feel like that would cause more problems, than not. And it's like, hello, friends, I've been using the bathroom that makes sense to me for the past 25 years. All this time. So we don't need laws. We don't need to ban this from happening because we're already in the bathrooms. We go every day. Like it's not whatever they're trying to say that people should be afraid of, it's not happening.
I'm curious about something with your career that you mentioned, and also maybe just with life. You've raised a lot of good points of the bathroom because I have trouble no matter where I go. You say that you can pass as cis, right? Like you can move through the world. Were you ever tempted to just pass, especially in your career? It's so hard to break into the industry. You are in so many ways a first. Like, what made you decide to speak up? And you've done that over and over and over again, and be a visible person and a voice for trans community?
Well, I had a period of time where I did get a chance to just be Brian, but I found that in doing so, I wasn't allowing myself to have access to parts of myself that I liked. It was I felt like I had thrown the baby out with the bathwater in a lot of ways, and part of my healing I needed to do that. But as I started to move forward into my life and really start to think about, okay, I spent a long time just trying to become a man. And now that I am, it's like, now I'm like, well, what kind of man do I want to be? And a lot of what helped me come to my sense of identity growing up, I don't really talk about in the way that I want to. I'm not really connected to it, like my athleticism, my sports journey, and some of these relationships that I had. There were some things about my childhood that were challenging and difficult because of my trans experience. But overall, there was so much beauty and so much love and so much support and so many like experiences that carried me through these moments where I'm challenged, right? Like my sense of self-determination came through my childhood. And if I'm not fully connected to that, then I'm just this person who feel like that, just almost like a new being, and it's like, no, I'm not 4 years old, it's like I'm 27. And there's 19 years that preceded this that is like I want to bridge. And then also in my, as an artist, it's like, what can I do with a role that no one else can do? What can I bring to the story that may not necessarily be in the page? And that's what being an actor is about, is your instrument. So your experience is kind of like your paints, So I felt like I wasn't allowing myself to really paint with all the colors in my palette. And I was like, I really want to do that because I don't see it anywhere. And I feel like that's what I can bring. And then I'm also fully aware of what it would mean to someone else to have that, right? And so if I continue to just take on cis roles and and no one knows that I'm trans, when these beautifully written trans parts come out, no one's thinking about me for it. So it's like I want to do these things. And now I feel like I had a chance to just work on the work and become the best actor that I could be. I felt like I had the capacity now to carry the kinds of stories that I wanted to, and I felt comfortable with myself and enough to paint with that part of myself. Where if I tried to do that earlier on in my career, I wasn't as comfortable with myself and my relationship, my identity to I guess say what I would like to say if a role was brought my way, or and then I didn't have like necessarily the skill set to really drop into the way that I wanted to tell the story. So everything kind of, I grew up at the right time. So by the time 2017, actually 2017 was I booked, but about 2015, 2016, I was specifically looking for trans masculine experience, either trying to create stories because I wasn't really seeing them, or letting my team know, I was like, I want to do this, because I had a sense of safety and security. I had a support system. I could do it. And I know that there's peers of mine who aren't able to do that just yet. So it's like, I can do it. And I wanted to.
I love you talking about like what kind of man do I want to be, and it kind of leads me to something that I'm really excited to talk to you about, which is the Intentional Man Project. It's one of my favorite things that you've done. And I talk so much about it because I don't know that a lot of like cis heterosexual people know this, but like a lot of times when you transition or when you're transmasculine in a community, a lot of people are like, hey, now that you are masculine or you're a man, like you need to step back, take up less space. And this project that you're a part of is like, okay, we're going to step back and we're going to have conversations about healthy masculinity with cisgender men, right? With men who are not trans. And I'm wondering, can you just talk to us a little bit about what is the Intentional Man Project, why it was important to you, and what it has meant for you to be part of it?
Yeah, I mean, going back to my early days, again, feeling very isolated, growing up in the 80s and the 90s, in Michigan, it's like I'm thinking something, I'm just off. I'm different. I have to accept that I'm different. There's nobody like me. And I don't know what the future holds, but I'm going forward, gonna figure this out. And then when I got to college, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do because I had a hard enough time trying to be a girl. And the only thing I see ahead of me is a woman. And that feels so foreign to me. I don't know what I'm going to do. And I literally cannot picture myself in the future because I can't see myself as a woman. Feeling so lost and, having like, it's close to the vocabulary I had. It was like almost like a breakdown. I'm like, well, what am I going to do? And I just got up and I'm like, there has to be a way. And, the little voice like, yeah, there is. And I'm like, oh, what are you talking about? That's not a thing. That's what they do on Jerry Springer. And I think that's a sin. That's not really a thing. And I've seen, men become women, but like, you need to like this. I'm like, okay, voice. And so I went online and I started to like look, and one of the first things that really stuck out to me was Jameson Green's website, because he had just put out his book Becoming a Visible Man. And so it's the biography of him. I'm reading his like life story, and they have like little pictures, little baby in like I think the 50s, then like a little tomboyish kind of like little girl, then someone who's like what we would call like a lesbian or very androgynous in the 70s, working in construction and kind of like just laying it out. But I feel like I'm reading a story that really kind of lines up with where I'm at, because it's not all about who he was attracted to, and a lot of the stories that I was reading and the coming out stories had to do with people knew that they were women, but they just knew that they were attracted to other women. And I'm like, I'm not. So it's like reading the story, like, well, this tracks. And then he got into his late 30s, early 40s. This picture of me looks like a very butch woman. And then, talking about transgender and this and that and that and that. And then the next picture is like a year later. And here's this man. And I was like, my heart opened up and like I could see down the road, because it wasn't like someone who was dressing up, and it wasn't like someone who had put it was like, there he is. And like you could see him kind of throughout the whole path. And there he was as an adult man. Like, this is what you grow up to be. And it's like, I could actually grow up. I actually felt like for the first time, I can grow up. So Jameson Green was that to me. And then some of the other blogs and things I came across was this zine that Rocco was a part of. So Rocco was kind of like a hero of possibility for me as well, because Jameson Green was a little bit older, but Rocco was like, my age and had done these amazing things and was an advocate and was like out there doing like amazing things, putting out music. It was an artist and it was like amazing, like him and Amos. So
for people who don't know who Rocco is, do you want to?
Yeah, Rocco Coyotes is catastrophe. Rocco, I mean, he's everything. He's a DJ. He was an artist. He came with the zine, did original plumbing for years. It was like this very specific magazine for the trans masculine community, and it was great. They used like the GQ meets Pinup Boys meets. I mean, it had everything that you wanted to see.
Everything, just everything. Interviews with trans, just showing us what trans masculinity could look like.
Yes, and
over, yeah,
right, and like hyper stylized ways, but then also in just like simple people just living their lives way. So it ran the spectrum of, again, like what was possible. And it's just made by these two dudes in like Brooklyn. I'm like, this unreal. And so I was like, so they both felt like heroes to me in a way. So when I came to LA, it was, I think, one of the first times meeting Rocco in person through like just, we know like similar people. So we did like some volleyball and we just met, we vibed, and it was great. And then he reached out and said, hey, I'm doing this podcast. And I think that you'd be great for it. It's called the Intentional Man Project. And the way that you speak about your experience and about, trans masculinity in general, I think it would be a great And I was like, I would love to, you know, be a part of this with you as somebody who was such an important voice as I was growing up, would be ready to be a part of that. So that's what we do. We have these conversations with people who meant a lot to us, or people that we looked up to, and we just talked about how to be an intentional man. Like, I think there's a kind of exploration that every adult should do at some point, when you start to ask yourself, well, what am I doing with the life and the things that have been given to me, or the things that have been withheld from me? And what am I going to do now that I'm capable of making my own decisions about how I'm going to show up? And trans people have to do that way more intensively, usually way earlier, and usually kind of in the dark amongst ourselves. But that kind of introspection and what we glean from that, those insights are valuable outside of our community. And so we wanted to share that. And that's what that podcast was about. So it was amazing to be able to do that with Rocco, and then to also be able to interview Jameson Green, you know, and have be a part of that. No, I'm sorry. The first time I met Rocco, what am I talking about? I think it was at Camp Lost Boys. So we do a camp. That's how I got to LA. What am I'm losing it. Rocco has been doing a camp called Camp Lost Boys for transmasculine people. We don't get the experience necessarily of sleepaway camp, right? And if we do get the experience, it's usually very gendered and we can't show up as ourselves. So Camp Lost Boys gives you that experience, but it's all like transmasculine people. They have amazing workshops. They have, you know, people come in. So he invited me to be a speaker, to lead a fireside chat and like experience the camp experience right before I came and like put my boots on the ground in LA. And that was like utopia, you know. Again, like, it's one thing to find your community online. It's another thing to like be removed from everything that you feel like you have to define yourself as, and be around people who are going to support whatever part of you are exploring, you know. And coming from different vantage points, it was so amazing to have people who were younger than me, people who were my age, people who were way older than me, and to just remind each other of like how different our experiences are, and like how different the landscape is, and what we can all learn from each other, especially in times like these. Because to have access to Jameson Green right now, he's like, we already went through this. This is what's going on in the 70s and the 80s with the gay liberation, and like we were kind of tied into that as well. And it was bad. And we this is how we got through it. This is what we fought for. This is how we showed up. This is what we must do. And this is how we press forward. And then we enjoy the peacetime. And then people forget, and then war comes again, and you got to fight. But don't worry, because there's peace coming again at the end of it. But you got to show up. So it was great to kind of to have that, because right now I think a lot of people from the generation right after mine, they never really experienced this level of antagonism before. And there's a lot of like, how? And it's like, oh, well.
We just keep showing up, right?
Yeah. Just keep showing up. And like, don't take it personal. Don't take it personal. It's not you. This is just cyclical. And this is what happens, you know, in society. And we can do it. You matter.
I think there's something really healing about the space that you're talking about too, like as a trans person, but also as a masculine person, right? I think a lot of our conversations around masculinity the last few years have been about toxic masculinity, which is real, it's a thing.
It was difficult. Like, I mean, during that time, because it was like, I worked so hard to be comfortable expressing all of my masculinity for once, you know, and to like sit in it and stand in it. And then it was like, almost as if like, should I not like this? And should I not say this? Is there no space for masculine appreciation? And it was like, no, that's not what's going on here. There's a version of masculinity that is toxic, that is tied to the patriarchy. You know, there's a misogynistic element of masculinity that is running rampant in our society, and it's silencing people. And it's probably, you know, a lot of the oppression that I felt is sort of rooted in this unrealistic idea of what masculinity is. And when I thought about, again, like that introspection, like what is it about masculinity that I like? And I realized it was none of these things, you know?
What is it that brings you that joy then? Like,
I think there's a way of owning yourself in a masculine way that's different than owning yourself in a feminine way. And it's not a greater than, less than at all. And I think we've been forced to see it as this way is better than that way. But there's something very potent and beautiful about feminine strength that I feel like we weren't really looking at as a society as valuable, right? And for me, I didn't allow myself to really look at it at all because femininity was forced on me for so long. So I was just like, get it out of here. I don't care. Like, I don't want to deal with it. I'm tired. Like, I get out. I don't want it because it was supplanting. It's like anything in me that was like masculine and what I wanted to do, how physical I was, because and the way that I expressed myself physically, whether it was, through contact sports or like rough housing and stuff like that was always pulled from me. Like you're not supposed to do that. And I'm like, that's a part of me. You're taking something from me. And then pulling that away and then trying to put something else is like, there was a lot of like, I don't want it. And like just against it. And it wasn't until I was able to sit comfortably in who I was without anybody taking anything from me, without me trying to minimize the way that I was expressing myself or like trying to make somebody else comfortable, where I was able to kind of just like sit and like, this is how I like to carry myself. This is how I like to walk through the world. This is how I like to wear my clothes. This is how I like to talk. I like the sound of my voice. I'm a loud person. I like to take up space. I don't want to use this as a power over someone else, but it is my power and I like it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got to be okay with that. And then once I was able to be okay with that without anybody taking it from me or trying to suppress it, and without anybody trying to replace it with the feminine energy, I was able to now like sit and appreciate what I wasn't, which was feminine energy, which is again, I think another thing that Denise brought into my life. She's such a innately feminine person.
Denise being your wife.
My wife, yes. And like but she's very feminine, but she is not weak. She's one of the strongest people that I know through this softness, but like so the way she carries herself is so different from me. But like I see that and I said, oh, I can really appreciate this. Oh, like feminine power, the feminine way of dealing with things. It's still getting things done. It's there, but there's a receptiveness to what is in a way that's different than coming in and so it's like, wow, I got a chance to really now see what was around, see what was in me, decide what I was going to allow to come out of me. Because it's not like I don't have feminine energy, I do, and now I got a chance to like kind of have room for that part of myself. It's like I can still be who I am and be in this feminine energy that's inside me. And I can partake in the feminine energy that's all around me. And maybe let's get our nails done again. Like, fuck, like, why not? I want to be pretty today. And feel okay with that. But it took me some time in that introspection. And again, starting to recognize like, wait, giving space for the feminine does not take away from the masculine. It's not an either or, and it's not like we're not saying femininity is better than, we're not saying that masculinity is better than, we're saying that these are two very necessary parts of the, I guess, human experience. And we have to stop acting as if one is greater than and one is less than, give space to both.
This just sounds like so much like healing around gender that you've done. And I'm curious, like, it sounds like all of us, whether we're transgender or not, like, can really benefit from this conversation. And I'm wondering if you have a thought about why that feels like such hard work for us to engage in. Like, gender just seems so tied to our identities. It's so tough to get in there, but it's so freeing to like really just sit with it and think through like, why is it hard?
I think because as humans in general, we'll identify with things that aren't necessarily what we are, but we'll identify with it as it is, right? So gender can definitely, like, you can either do that with your gender, you can do that with your race, you can do that with your family structure, and your identity gets a little too aligned with one part of who you are, so that if anything challenges that. It feels like a challenge to who you are, your entire existence. And we fight that with everything that we have, right? So what's been helpful for me is like kind of mindfulness work. And like, 'cause we can do the same thing with your feelings. Like sometimes we over-identify with our feelings. So then when somebody is challenging us or, you know, not seeing our feelings, we like, you don't see me, and like, ah. And so we're just it's attachment. So sometimes I feel like our attachment to different parts of ourselves can kind of get in the way of us connecting with other people or connecting in the world and putting something into the world that we want. But there's usually a reason behind that, right? So for me, because my gender was being invalidated so much, I was like very attached to it and like holding it out, and I couldn't withstand any attack from it, you know, or anything that felt like an attack. There was no space for openness, for curiosity, right? Like I couldn't be open because it could be taken from me. And like it was this constant battle of you're not this, you're that, you're this, and you're that. And you put this on and you walk like this, you talk like this. And it was like, you know, so I had a very tight hold on it. And it was like, it has to be like that. And then as we go through our journeys as trans people, I feel like that's kind of how we have to do. First, because we're guarding what we know. Then we're like, now we're putting it out in the world. We have to really protect it, right? Because this is all you're going to see first. You're not even dealing with the other part. You're not dealing with my feelings. You're not dealing with my passions. You're not dealing with my you're only dealing with this thing right now. And so I got to hold on to it, and it's and protect it and whatever. And then hopefully we get to a place where it's not under attack. It's clear who I am in terms of my gender identity. I'm comfortable with how I'm expressing it. I'm being received and it's being respected. I feel safe. And now I can kind of like bring it back over here with the rest of the stuff and then go, oh, thank you for all that work that you did, because you helped me get here. Thank you. But, oh, I didn't see this other side of you, gender. I didn't know. I had no idea. Like because I'm looking at it this way. I had to go through the world like this with the gender in front of me like this. I once I put it down because I felt safe, and now I can look at it from a different side. I realized there's so much more going on to it, but I have to be safe to do that. And the safety comes like you understanding like this is just a part of who I am. So you need to be safe to do that. And then feeling safe with the people around you who are going to, I'll protect that for you. I'm going to affirm your gender when you're not around. You don't worry, we got you. So there's a safety in that. And then there's a safety in the world at large, where it's like, I might not understand what's going on there, but I'm not going to let anybody hurt you. So but you need that safety to do that. You know what I mean?
Brian, we're almost out of time, which is wild. This has gone so quickly, but I want to ask you, is there anything coming up for you that you want to let us know about? What are you working on?
We are on hiatus for Lone Star, so we got season 5 cooking up. So there's more in store for Paul Strickland that I'm excited to kind of dive into. And then during the summer, I'm in my enrichment phase, so I'm writing a lot more. Hopefully, some of these ideas I've been developing, I can put out into the world in terms of a film down the road. But I'm like painting, I'm hanging out with my dog, and just kind of enjoying what I just said, like just kind of the safety that I have, even in these tumultuous times, because I know that we are showing up and that we are fighting and that the pendulum is going to swing back this way. But only if we keep doing the work.
Does Charlie want to wish us a happy Pride?
Let's see. Charlotte, come. Give a tip taps. Oh yeah, you want to say happy? He brought me all the toys. Oh my God. Bring us your Pride cake. Thank you. This is T'Challa. He said, happy Pride. Enjoy Pride cake.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Happy Pride, puppy. Thank you so much for talking to us today. And thank you everyone at home for tuning in. If you'd like to see more of our Pride coverage, visit us at the19thnews.org, and we will see you all next time.